We're counting down 25 survival weapons Appalachian hunters swore by. Tools that fed families through hard winters, lean years, and long mountain nights when the nearest town sat a full day's walk through laurel thickets. From hand-forged blades passed down through 4 generations to lever actions that put venison on the table for a century, each entry tells the story of grit, craftsmanship, and the wisdom of haulers that learned to survive on what they could carry, fix, and reload by firelight. Expect iron-sighted rifles your grandfather would recognize, knives sharpened on creek stones, and traps that still work better than anything hanging on a hardware store wall today. Which weapon earned the top spot in every mountain cabin from Georgia to West Virginia? Let's begin the countdown with number 25. Number 25. The Green River skinning knife cut through more hide in Appalachian haulers than any other blade in the 1800s. Named after the Green River Works in Greenfield, Massachusetts, where John Russell began forging them in 1834, these thin-bladed butcher and skinning knives spread south with the long hunters and settled into every mountain cabin by the 1850s. A basic Green River cost around 25 cents at a trading post, cheap enough for a boy's first belt knife and sharp enough to dress a 100-pound buck by lantern light. Hunters carried them in rawhide sheaths at the hip, sharpening the carbon steel blade on a creek stone until it could split a hair on the back of a hand. Oral histories from the Smokies recall fathers teaching sons to cape a deer using nothing but a Green River and a sharp eye. Its worn handle told the story of every winter it had seen. Number 24. The hand-forged hatchet hung from every Appalachian hunter's belt, a tool as essential as the rifle itself. Local blacksmiths in towns like Abingdon, Virginia, and Boone, North Carolina hammered them out of wagon springs and scrap iron, fitting the heads onto hickory handles cured in the rafters for a full year. A good smith charged about 75 cents for a finished hatchet in 1870, and a well-kept one outlived its owner. Hunters used it to split kindling at the campfire, quarter a deer where it fell, finish a wounded hog, or drive a trap stake into frozen ground. The pole doubled as a hammer, and the edge served as a skinner in a pinch. Oral histories from Kentucky describe men who could fell a sapling, dress a squirrel, and drive a tent peg with the same tool before breakfast. Factory hatchets flooded hardware stores by 1920, but the hand-forged ones stayed in the cabin, their edges honed thin by decades of use. Number 23. The slingshot, carved from a forked dogwood limb and strung with strips of red rubber cut from an old inner tube, was the first weapon every Appalachian boy ever carried. By the 1920s, every hauler had its sharpshooters, 9- and 10-year-olds who could knock a squirrel out of a hickory at 30 paces with a smooth creek pebble. The rubber came free from the filling station, the leather pouch from a worn-out shoe tongue, and the ammunition cost nothing at all. Fathers taught sons to shoot before they trusted them with a .22 caliber rifle, building the steady hand and patient eye that mountain hunting demanded. Oral histories from West Virginia recall boys bringing home enough squirrels before supper to feed a family of 7. The slingshot fed lean households through the Depression when a box of rifle cartridges cost 40 cents that nobody had, and a smooth stone cost nothing. Number 22. The frog gig and the fish spear turned creek banks and slow river pools into a second larder for families living miles from any market. Hunters lashed a 3- or 4-pronged iron head onto a straight cane pole or hickory sapling. They waded the shallows at night with a pine knot torch held high to freeze the frogs in its glow. A blacksmith-forged gig head cost about 15 cents in 1900, but most mountain men bent their own from wagon spokes and old pitchforks. The strike had to be fast and sure, driven straight down before the frog could kick free. Oral histories from the Cumberland Plateau recall summer nights when two men came home with a burlap sack heavy with bullfrogs, their legs bound for the skillet by morning. The same gig took carp and suckers from shoalwater, feeding families through the hungry weeks of late winter when the smokehouse had run dry. Number 21. Snare wire coiled in every hunter's possible's bag offered a weapon that worked while its owner slept. A few yards of soft brass or annealed steel wire, bought for pennies at the general store, could be twisted into a dozen loops and set along rabbit runs, groundhog trails, and deer paths through the laurel. The mountain trick was reading the sign first, the hair on a low branch, the compressed leaves where a deer habitually stepped, the narrow gap where a cottontail had cut through a thicket for a generation. A well-placed snare held fast without bruising the meat, and a good trap line of 20 loops could feed a family all winter. Oral histories from the Blue Ridge describe boys running their lines before school, skinning 2 rabbits by the cook stove, and handing the pelts to their mothers for a nickel bounty. Quiet, cheap, and ruthlessly effective. Number 20. The figure 4 deadfall trap was older than any firearm carried into the mountains, a weapon built from nothing but 3 carved sticks and a flat stone heavy enough to crush a possum. Mountain trappers cut the trigger, post, and bait stick from seasoned hickory with a pocket knife, notched them to lock under tension, and propped the slab above a bait of salted meat or a ripe persimmon. When the animal touched the bait, the whole structure collapsed in a heartbeat. The beauty of the deadfall was that it cost absolutely nothing and could be rebuilt anywhere the hunter stood. Oral histories from the Cherokee and later Scots-Irish settlers confirm that children learned the notch cuts before they learned to read. A good trapper in the 1890s might keep 30 deadfalls running through the winter, bringing in enough possum, coon, coon, and squirrel to fill the stew pot for months on end without spending a single cent on gunpowder. Number 19. The New House steel leg-hold trap, forged at the Oneida Community Factory in New York from 1855 onward, revolutionized Appalachian trapping and made winters a little less hungry for families who ran a proper line. A number 1 New House, sized for mink and muskrat, cost around 30 cents in 1880, while the bear-sized number 6 ran $3, a serious investment for a mountain household. The double-spring steel jaws closed with enough force to hold a fox indefinitely, and a run of 50 traps along a creek drainage could bring in enough fur to pay the year's taxes. Oral histories from the Monongahela region recall boys walking 10-mile trap lines in knee-deep snow, their hands blue, returning with otter, mink, and raccoon slung over the shoulders. The pelts sold for real cash money to traveling fur buyers, and a good trapper could outfit his whole family on what the new houses brought in each season. Number 18. The Osage Orange longbow drew its power from a wood so tough the Cherokee and later white settlers prized it above all others for hunting. A proper bow stave cut from a straight Osage trunk, seasoned for 2 full years under the cabin eaves, then shaped with a draw knife and tillered on a porch post, could throw a cedar arrow clean through a whitetail at 40 yards. Hunters fletched their arrows with turkey wing feathers and napped flint or hand-forged iron broadheads, carrying a dozen in a rawhide quiver slung across the back. Oral histories from the southern Appalachians describe hunters who preferred the bow for squirrel and turkey because it made no sound to spook the woods. A finished Osage self-bow was worth $5 in trade in 1850, but a man who could build his own needed nothing but time, patience, and the right tree on the right slope. Number 17. The bear spear held a place of respect in every mountain cabin that backed onto big timber, a weapon that meant survival when a black bear came down out of the rocks for the corn crib or the hog pen. Hunters forged the heads at local shops, a heavy leaf-shaped blade nearly 1 foot long, with a crossbar welded below to keep a charging bear from running up the shaft. The socket fit onto an 8-foot ash or hickory pole, straight-grained and sturdy enough to take the full weight of a 500-pound animal. A finished bear spear cost about $1.50 in 1860, but most mountain men made their own. Oral histories from the Great Smokies recall hunters who used the spear as a final tool when a wounded bear went to ground in a rock den and a rifle shot was too risky in the dark. Brutal, direct, and trusted. Number 16. Tomahawk, frontier hunters' versatile tool. The tomahawk traveled the Appalachians long before the first settler crossed the Blue Ridge, and it stayed in mountain hands well into the 1900s as the most versatile tool a hunter could carry. Early trade hawks, forged in Birmingham, England, and sold to both Cherokee and colonial traders for about 25 cents a head, featured a narrow blade on one side and a hammer pole or pipe bowl on the other. Hunters used them to split firewood, butcher game, throw at small targets, and defend themselves against panthers and trespassers alike. Oral histories from the Watauga settlements describe long hunters who carried 2 tomahawks at the belt, one for work, one for fighting. The steel held an edge through a season of hard use, and a skilled thrower could bury the blade an inch deep in a pine trunk at 20 feet. It was the closest thing a frontier hunter had to a universal tool. Number 15. The Bowie knife was born in the 1830s after James Bowie's legendary sandbar fight, and it swept into Appalachian belts, never leaving. Mountain blacksmiths in Tennessee and Kentucky copied the pattern relentlessly, forging heavy clip-point blades between 9 and 12 inches long, with brass guards and hardwood handles. A store-bought Sheffield Bowie cost about $3 in 1850, but a custom local version from a trusted smith cost half as much. Hunters used it for everything a lighter knife could not handle: splitting deer pelvises, quartering a bear, chopping through rib cages, and finishing wounded game that had not gone down to the first shot. Oral histories from East Tennessee describe old hunters who carried the same Bowie for 40 years, its blade worn narrow from a lifetime of sharpening on the same whetstone. It was a working knife first and a fighting knife second, and it earned its reputation on both counts. Number 14. The Harper's Ferry Model 1805 flintlock pistol holstered on a hunter's belt meant close-range power when the long rifle was out of reach. Made at the Federal Armory in present-day West Virginia, at the very edge of Appalachia, these .54 caliber smoothbore pistols were the first firearms manufactured at a U.S. arsenal. Many trickled down into civilian hands through militia sales and veterans kits after the War of 1812, where mountain hunters carried them as finishing weapons for wounded deer or as defense against panthers and wild hogs in heavy brush. The brass-mounted walnut stock and 11-inch barrel threw a round lead ball hard enough to drop a deer at 20 paces. Oral histories from the Shenandoah Valley describe hunters who inherited their grandfather's Harper's Ferry and kept shooting it decades after percussion caps had replaced flint. The flintlock kept working when everything modern had failed. Number 13. The Colt Walker revolver, introduced in 1847 and weighing nearly 5 pounds fully loaded, brought 6-shot firepower to the mountain hunter for the first time. Designed by Samuel Colt and Texas Ranger Samuel Walker, the 44 caliber cap and ball wheel gun threw a 60-grain powder charge, more than any production handgun before it, and a few trickled into Appalachia through returning Mexican War veterans. Hunters used them as a second weapon on dangerous game, as a backup when a wounded boar charged, or a black bear came out of a hollow log swinging. The pistol cost about $25 new, nearly a month's wages, so most mountain walkers pass through 3 or 4 owners before settling into a family's possession. Oral histories from Southwest Virginia recall grandfathers who kept a walker loaded above the door well into the 1890s. When trouble came out of the woods, the walker answered it. Number 12. The double-barrel coach gun, with its short 20-inch tubes and heavy buckshot loads, became the all-purpose weapon of Appalachian farmers and hunters alike. Side-by-side 12-gauge shotguns by makers like L.C. Smith, Parker Brothers, and Ithaca sold for anywhere from $7 to $25 in the 1890s, depending on grade. The 2 barrels meant 2 chances, buckshot in one for deer and hogs, birdshot in the other for turkey and grouse flushed from the laurel. Hunters loaded their own shells on the kitchen table, measuring black powder by the dipper and cutting wads from old felt hats. Oral histories from the Allegheny foothills describe men who carried the same Parker for 50 years, the bluing worn to silver on the receiver, the stock scarred from climbing through rhododendron. When a farmer needed one gun for everything that walked, flew, or threatened the henhouse, the double barrel answered the call. Number 11. The Stevens' favorite single-shot .22 rifle, introduced in 1893 and sold through the Sears catalog for an affordable $3.75, put a rifle in the hands of every Appalachian boy old enough to be trusted with one. The falling block action was dead simple, almost impossible to break, and the octagonal barrel shot straighter than anything in its price range. Fathers taught sons to hunt squirrels with a Stevens favorite, one shot at a time, because a box of 50 .22 short cartridges cost 15 cents, and every miss meant another nickel out of the family purse. Oral histories from the Pocahontas County hills describe boys who could drop a gray squirrel out of a red oak at 60 feet with a favorite and bring home a dozen before dark. The Stevens stayed in production through 1935, and mountain attics still hold thousands of them, their barrels brown with age, but their actions working smoothly. The Percussion caplock muzzleloader ruled Appalachian deer camps from the 1840s onward, replacing the older flintlock with a weapon that worked in rain, damp snow, and the heavy fog that settled into the hollers. A copper percussion cap, priced at about a penny apiece, fired far more reliably than flint-striking steel, and mountain gunsmiths converted thousands of flintlocks to the new system for about $2 per gun. Hunters carried a brass powder flask, a leather ball pouch, and a capper on the belt, reloading in under 1 minute by practiced habit. Oral histories from the Cumberland Gap region describe old hunters who refused to switch to cartridge rifles well into the 1880s, insisting the caplock threw a softer, more accurate ball and made less noise in the woods. A well-kept caplock could shoot for 100 years, and some did, handed down through 4 generations of mountain sons. Number 9. The Sharps Model. 1874 rifle, a falling block single shot chambered in big cartridges like 4570 and 5090, gave Appalachian hunters reach that no previous weapon could match. A Sharps business rifle sold for about $25 new, and a few found their way east from the Buffalo Range into the hands of mountain hunters who used them for deer and black bear at ranges past 200 yards. The heavy barrel and precise iron sights made the Sharps a genuine long-range rifle decades before the term existed. Oral histories from the Blue Ridge describe hunters who took shots across whole valleys, dropping a buck on the far ridge with a single .45-70 round that carried over 300 yards. The recoil was punishing, and the cartridges cost 10 cents apiece, real money in 1880, but when the shot had to count, the sharps delivered every single time. Number 8. The Trapdoor Springfield was the United States Army's standard rifle from 1873 to 1892, and it flooded into Appalachia as surplus after the Spanish-American War. Thousands of the hinged breech single-shot rifles were sold through Bannerman's catalog and hardware stores for as little as $1.50 in the early 1900s. Chambered in .45-70 government, the Trapdoor fired a heavy 400-grain bullet that dropped deer, bear, and the last of the mountain elk with authority. Hunters loved the simple action, the ease of cleaning, and the cheap surplus ammunition that came packed in wooden crates. Oral histories from the New River Gorge describe entire hunting camps where every man carried a trapdoor, the rifles lined up against a cabin wall at dusk. The stocks came scarred from Army service, but the barrels were still true, and a well-aimed .45-70 was enough to feed a family through the longest winter. Number 7. The Remington rolling block was a mountain workhorse, produced in 1867 and sold in calibers from .22 rimfire to the massive .50-70. It found its place in mountain gun racks as a working rifle that almost never broke. The rolling block action was famously strong, with just 2 moving parts behind the cartridge. A sporting model in .44-77 cost about $16 in the 1880s. Mountain hunters used them for deer, bear, and target matches at the county fair, where a good rolling block shooter could win back his rifle's price in silver dollars on a single Saturday afternoon. Oral histories from East Kentucky recall fathers who taught their sons to shoot with a rolling block because the recoil was manageable and the action forgiving of dirty hands. When a mountain hunter needed a rifle that would outlast him and his sons, and likely his grandsons, the Remington rolling block was the choice. Number 6. The Winchester Model 62, a pump-action .22 introduced in 1932 and selling for about $16 during the Depression, became the gallery gun of every Appalachian hunting family. The slide-action feed let a skilled shooter empty the 14-round tube magazine in about 6 seconds, plenty fast enough for a squirrel jumping from limb to limb, or a rabbit breaking for a brush pile. Hunters bought bulk .22 long rifle ammunition at 50 cents a box of 50, cheap enough that a boy could practice every day after chores. Oral histories from the Clinch Mountain country recall family suppers of squirrel gravy served over biscuits, every gray squirrel in the pot dropped with a single headshot from a Model 62. The pump action never jammed. The octagonal barrel stayed accurate through decades of use, and the rifle hung on countless cabin pegs, its bluing worn to gray by 1,000 trips up the ridge. Number 5. The Marlin Model 336 lever action, introduced in 1948 and chambered most commonly in .30-30 Winchester, became the deer rifle of modern Appalachia, carried from Pennsylvania to North Georgia through the second half of the 20th century. Its side ejection port let hunters mount a scope without the interference that plagued the Winchester 94, and the round bolt action ran smoothly enough to shoot left-handed or right-handed without adjustment. A new Marlin 336 cost about $75 in 1960, an affordable working rifle that would put venison on the table for 40 seasons. Oral histories from the West Virginia coal country describe miners who traded their pay envelopes for a 336 at the hardware store and hunted the same rifle until their grandsons carried it. The .30-30 cartridge, at under 150 yards, dropped every whitetail that ever walked, and the Marlin put the bullet exactly where the hunter called it. Number 4. The Winchester model, 1894 lever action, designed by John Moses Browning and selling for about $18 in 1895, became the most recognized deer rifle in Appalachian history. Over 7 million have been built, and a significant portion ended up hanging on gun racks in trucks and cabins from the Catskills to Alabama. The .30-30 Winchester cartridge, introduced with the rifle, was the first American sporting round designed specifically for smokeless powder, and it flattened the trajectory of deer hunting forever. Hunters loved the flat receiver, the tube magazine holding 6 rounds, and the saddle ring model that rode easy in a scabbard. Oral histories from the Pocono Range describe 3 generations of a single family hunting the same model 1894, the bluing rubbed from the loading gate, the wood darkened with linseed oil and sweat. When a man said he carried a .30-30, every mountain hunter knew exactly what he meant. Number 3. The Hawken rifle was built by brothers Jacob and Samuel Hawken in their St. Louis shop from about 1823 onward. It set the standard for serious American hunting rifles, and it spread east into the southern mountains through returning trappers and mountain men. A Hawken in 50 or 54 caliber, with its heavy octagonal barrel and double-set triggers, cost about $25 in 1840, nearly twice the price of a standard long rifle. But it was worth every penny for the accuracy and stopping power. Appalachian hunters used them for elk in the days when elk still roamed the Smokies, for bear, and for wild bison on the edge of the bluegrass. Oral histories from the Nolichucky River Valley describe hunters who considered the Hawken the finest rifle ever made, a weapon that could drop a bull elk at 150 yards with a single patched round ball. Heavy, slow to load, but deadly precise. Number 2. The case folding pocket knife, manufactured by W.R. Case & Sons in Bradford, Pennsylvania, from 1889 onward, rode in the pocket of every Appalachian hunter born in the 20th century. The 3-blade Stockman pattern, with its long clip, spay, and sheep's foot blades, sold for about $1.75 in 1920 and stayed sharp through a week of hard field use. Hunters used it to field dressed deer, skin squirrels, whittle trap triggers, cut fishing line, and open cans of pork and beans at the campfire. Oral histories from the Black Mountains of North Carolina describe old hunters who could dress a whole buck with a single case knife in under 20 minutes, wiping the blade clean on a pants leg between cuts. A well-kept case lived in the same pocket for 50 years, its bone handle yellowed to the color of old ivory, its blades sharpened thin as a leaf. No mountain hunter was ever without one. And finally, in first place, the Kentucky long rifle crowned the weapons racks of Appalachia as the rifle that built the mountains themselves. Developed by German gunsmiths in Pennsylvania from about 1730 onward, the long rifle reached its full form in the hands of makers like Jacob Dickert, John Armstrong, and the Beck family, who rifled .40 to .50 caliber barrels up to 44 inches long and fitted them into graceful, curly maple stocks with brass patch boxes. A custom long rifle cost about $15 in 1790, a fortune that bought a weapon accurate to 200 yards at a time when smoothbore muskets struggled past 50 yards. Long hunters like Daniel Boone carried them through the Cumberland Gap and into the dark forests of Kentucky and Tennessee, living off deer, elk, and buffalo taken with patched round balls the size of a cherry. Oral histories from every corner of Appalachia describe the long rifle as the weapon that fed the frontier, the tool that gave a mountain family independence from every store and every town. A skilled rifleman could load and fire 3 shots a minute, split a cedar stake at 80 paces, and drop a running buck across a meadow, the maple stalks darkened with age and sweat, the barrels grew brown with patina, and the rifles passed from fathers to sons through 5 and 6 generations. Some long rifles built before 1800 are still shooting today, their locks rebuilt, their barrels re-rifled, their stocks oiled with the same care their original owners gave them. The Kentucky long rifle was more than a weapon. It was the tool that shaped the mountain character, the instrument of a people who learned to stand on their own ground with their own hands. When a hunter picked up a long rifle, he picked up the whole history of Appalachia in a single piece of walnut and iron. Across all 25 entries, from the humble Green River skinning knife to the legendary Kentucky long rifle, these Appalachian weapons tell a powerful story of self-reliance, craftsmanship, and the deep connection between a people and the mountains that fed them. Some tools, like the deadfall trap and the slingshot, cost nothing at all, while others, like the Hawken and the long rifle, represented a year's savings. But every one of them earned its place in the cabin by working hard, lasting long, and coming through when the family needed meat on the table. These were not museum pieces. They were the taste of survival, passed hand to hand through the hollers, and their memory still echoes wherever a mountain hunter carries an old long rifle up a familiar ridge.